A network effect is an attribute of a company or other system such that as more people use the network becomes exponentially more valuable for each user. It's one of the strongest economic moats that a system can have against competitors. This video is about network effects. Why are they hard to break? Why are they maybe impossible to break in the case of Bitcoin? And how does Bitcoin derive value from its network effect? The video is based on an article by Lyn Alden. I read several of her articles and they are all excellent and absolutely worth a read. She starts with a few examples of network effects. The telephone is a one-sided network. Here, the entry definition clearly makes sense. If just one person has a telephone, it's completely useless. If two people have one, there is some value. The more people you can call or receive calls from, the more valuable is the telephone as a technology. The growth you can see here is also known as Metcalfe's law. The amount of connections are equal to 0.5 times the squared nodes. The telephone and internet are both examples of one-sided networks, meaning that users could connect with other users, and each type of user or node is basically the same. Not all networks are one-sided like the telephone though. There are also two-sided networks. Two-sided just means that there are two different types of nodes. A wants to connect with B, but not with another A. An example of a two-sided network would be buyers and sellers. eBay, for example, exploded in value by getting a critical mass of buyers and sellers onto its online platform. The equation for a two-sided network is also exponential. Payment cards are another good example. Over many decades, there have just been 4 different ones in the US, not 40 or even 10. Why? The reason for there being so few and only 2 or 3 truly dominant ones has to do with the network effect. Merchants won't accept cards that aren't popular because it's not worth the hassle. Consumers won't get cards that merchants don't accept. It's a circular problem, a catch-22. That's why a network effect, once created, is hard to displace. It would be exceedingly difficult to create a new credit card network. That's why there are not many successful examples of companies or technologies that disrupted existing network effects. They usually either fail or become complementary to the existing ones. Think about PayPal or Apple Pay, for example. They didn't kill off credit cards, but rather brought the internet with them and even increased the value of credit cards by increasingly eliminating physical cash. One example where the disruption did work was social networks. Facebook surpassing MySpace is the most famous example here. And interestingly enough, it's also an example that Bitcoin critics like to use, because they say that Bitcoin is just the MySpace of cryptocurrencies. Or to use another example, it's the Yahoo of search engines. Lyn lists 2 primary reasons for Facebook surpassing MySpace. First, Facebook started as a niche network with real names rather than anonymity and achieved dominance in that space. And secondly, MySpace missed the smartphone movement and Facebook embraced it. Facebook's combination of real names, dominating the college scene, and adopting quickly to smartphone proliferation while MySpace lagged at mobile adoption, made Facebook 10 times better than MySpace in terms of viral potential, and from there, the difference was unrecoverable. You also have to keep in mind that MySpace was just 6 months older than Facebook. Its head start was not as strong as you might think. But when is the head start strong enough? When is a network strong enough to resist disruption? Michael Saylor put a number on it, $100 billion. When a company with a strong network effect reaches a $100 billion valuation in today's money and is far larger than any of its competitors, the divide is virtually unrecoverable and the risk-reward for betting on that leading network company to continue to succeed is very favorable. MySpace hit a peak valuation of about $12 billion. Facebook now sits at almost $1 trillion. But now let's get to the gist of it. Let's stop talking about internet companies, but instead talk about the internet itself, which will naturally lead us to Bitcoin. We think of the internet as a fast-paced, changing entity, and it is. However, it's built on a protocol foundation that as of this writing is pretty old. The internet runs on a set of protocols known as TCP/IP. This was developed in the 1970s, 4.5 decades ago, and yet it continues to be the foundation of the internet with no signs of that network effect weakening anytime in the foreseeable future. What makes TCP/IP so great is its simplicity and flexibility. You don't need to change this protocol, because you can simply build anything on top of it. In other words, most of the development happens on the application layer, not the protocol layer. We don't overhaul the foundation of the internet every 5 years. Instead, we just keep overhauling the surface layer. Sounds familiar? When something is simple and does its job and becomes ubiquitous, it tends to hang around for a long time, with incremental upgrades. Again, sounds familiar? Bitcoin is exactly that. A fairly simple, albeit genius design that builds the base layer for many future applications. The simplicity is already visible in the white paper. The Bitcoin white paper is just 9 pages long. The Lightning white paper as second layer technology is 59 pages long. Lyn Alden argues that the Bitcoin protocol has likely achieved escape velocity. This is an extremely bullish statement. If we go back to my video on hyper-Bitcoinization, what she describes is what I meant when I said Bitcoin might have reached the event horizon like a black hole. There is no going back to a world in which Bitcoin doesn't exist. We can look at a few metrics when looking at Bitcoin's network effect. First of all, Bitcoin has reached the $100 billion mark that Michael Saylor mentioned. It has even crossed the $1 trillion mark a few times. We can look at security or miner activity. Bitcoin's hash rate is in up-only mode. It's significantly more expensive to attack Bitcoin compared to Litecoin, Bitcoin Cash, BSV, and so on. Similarly, the number of Bitcoin addresses holding 1 BTC, 0.1 BTC, and 0.01 BTC continues to increase. You can't really say here that one address is equal to one person, but it's at least somewhat close. Measuring the amount of Bitcoin users is really hard. But you can estimate that there is at least 100 million people who own Bitcoin. Coinbase alone has 73 million users. We also talked about nodes before. There are tens of thousands of Bitcoin and Lightning nodes by now, and there are a lot more arguments for a strengthened network effect. The hard fork topic is resolved, which was easily one of the most scary times in Bitcoin's history. Bitcoin retained the vast majority of the market share, while Bitcoin Cash diminished in comparison, and then split again between Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Satoshi Vision. They have dropped below 1% relevance together. That's a crucial point, because a lot of people ask if a blockchain is open source and protocols can be forked, then is Bitcoin really finite? The answer is yes, as long as the community remains focused on one protocol. I could technically copy Wikipedia, all of the data can fit on a thumb drive, and try to host it on my website as Lynpedia. Would I be a real challenge to Wikipedia's traffic if I did? Of course not. You can always fork Bitcoin or create your new shitcoin in various ways like we see every single day. But then you're up against Bitcoin's network effect. I previously talked about this in my video on Bitcoin being the Schelling point of money. We have seen new layers developing over the years. I might talk about Impervious soon, which seems really promising. This could be the real Web3. Lightning, Bitcoin's payment network, of course, is growing rapidly as previously discussed. Institutional-grade custody solutions have rolled out, including by Fidelity. These solutions provide robust on-ramps for institutional money to enter the industry. Previous Bitcoin bull runs were driven by retail investors and speculators, while 2020 was the year of institutional interest. Major investors entering also increases the trust in Bitcoin. The network effect pulled in some of the most successful investors, and these people owning Bitcoin strengthens the network effect even further. It's circular. To summarize why Bitcoin and the Internet, or namely TCP/IP, are so similar. Bitcoin focuses on doing one thing very well, being a decentralized and secure store of value and payment settlement layer. Other layers built on top of Bitcoin can expand this capability, but that simple thing is what the base protocol does. To disrupt Bitcoin or any other network, you need something that's 10 times better. In Bitcoin's case, that something simply doesn't exist, and I would argue it can never exist. No project is as decentralized as Bitcoin, nor can it ever be. You can only improve one axis if you disregard the others. See the blockchain trilemma. It's about trade-offs. A 10 times better Bitcoin is not possible. This is Bitcoin's unbreakable network effect, and this is my conclusion. Lyn has another one from an investor's perspective. With its strong track record and the ongoing development in the surrounding ecosystem, hardware products, payment apps, security apps, custody solutions, regulatory improvements, and second layer development, I think Bitcoin deserves a consideration for a non-zero allocation in a portfolio. And that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it and took something out of it. If you did, I would recommend 2 more videos to you. One is my video on hyper-Bitcoinization, and the other one on Bitcoin's game theory, or more specifically, the Schelling point of money. I would also appreciate it if you leave a like and subscribe to the channel for further content, and then I see you next time.